Welcome to Real Rockford Files, for tales of the paranormal, supernatural, and the flat-out unbelievable. Today's episode will be a mega compilation of alien, UFO, and time slip stories. To start off, story 1 will be a personal time slip story. Let's get into it. Story 1. It was the year 2021 or 2022, and I was living with my dad in Rockford, Illinois, just west of 11th Street on 7th Avenue. My mother passed away 5 years plus prior, and it was just the two of us. Where we lived at the time, our garbage pickup day was Wednesday. So one Tuesday, I was talking to my dad about getting the garbage out to the road, because the next day was garbage day. I then decided to put it off till the last minute and told him I'll take it out before I head to bed. Went into my room completely by accident, fell asleep forgetting to take out the trash. When I woke up, it was already late in the afternoon, around 5 or 6 p.m. By the time I made it to the living room where my dad sat, just past the kitchen area, I noticed the garbage and said out loud, "Aw crap, I didn't get the garbage out, now it's too late." As I rechecked the time on my phone, that's when I noticed, next to the time was the date, and the day of the week said Thursday. Immediately alarm bells are going off in my head screaming, "I've been abducted." I didn't panic, I just calmly said to my dad, "Did you know it's Thursday?" He looked at me like he wasn't getting my meaning, so I repeated, "Today is Thursday." His eyebrows crinkled up. "But yesterday was Tuesday," he said. We talked it over for a while, and we were both positive we're missing one entire day. I think we were abducted, but your guess is as good as mine. Story 2. So last year I experienced something that was absolutely strange. I just keep coming back to it, thinking about what this could have been, and I can't get it out of my head. I read the text conversation of my fiancée from that night, saved on my phone, and my text as it was happening, describing what I'm hearing and seeing, and it was just so vivid and real I couldn't believe it. It was about midnight one night, and I was in my room at my parents' house. There are two windows in this room, one facing the backyard and one facing the side of the neighbor's house, and I will be referencing to the one facing the backyard. This night, my blinds were shut and the overhead light in the room was on. All of a sudden, this big blue beam of light comes rushing in through the shut blinds of the window, making a swooshing noise as it comes in. This light was bright blue. I'm talking LED blue, bright as day, even with the room lights on and the blinds shut. I'm terrified, feeling like I cannot move from my bed, and as quick as it swooshes in, it swooshes back out. I hear rustling, almost raking of leaves after the light is left, and the world is silent otherwise. I could not explain this as anything human or man-made. This light was not a headlight. It could not have made it through my shut blinds, over the fence, and up to the second floor of our house. The story does not end here. 2 weeks later, to the day, at around the same time, the same thing happened. Same bright blue beam and same swooshing and raking. I told myself I would get up and see what it is this time, but I was in shock as it was happening again, and once again, I could not move. My biggest regret to this day is not looking out my window either of the nights. If anyone has any insight in this experience, I would be grateful. I'd like answers for something to make me feel a little more sane. Story 3. As far as I can remember, I've always been able to see things. One specific encounter stays in my head. I was about 7 to 8 years old. I shared a room with my older sister, and we both slept on a full-size bed that was gifted to us. I slept against the wall because she was older and said I could fall to the floor if I slept on the other end. We always went to bed around 8:30 p.m. on school nights, and my parents always left our bedroom door open. It must have been during September or October, because it was quite cool. One night, I was awoken by what sounded like footsteps. I felt pressure on the bed as if someone put their knee down on it, because I felt my sister roll down. The only problem is that I wasn't able to open my eyes or turn away from the wall. In my head, I told myself to turn around, and something responded back in my head, don't look at me. This conversation went on for what seemed like minutes before I finally was able to gather up the courage to turn around. As I turned to see this being, it was now holding my sister up in its arms, trying to lift her out of our bed. I gasped and pushed my little body back up against the wall. This thing laid my sister back down ever so gently and put its long pale finger up to its non-existent mouth and said, "Shh." I wanted to scream. I wanted to yell for my dad to come help us, but nothing could come out of my mouth. I started to cry without any sound, and right as this thing began to lift my sister up again, I let out the most blood-curdling scream. "Dad! Dad! There's something in my room!" This thing stared so angrily at me and dropped my sister back down. It must have been about 3 to 4 feet in height and was wearing what I could only remember describing it as like an underwater swimsuit that Scooby-Doo wore in one of his episodes. This thing tiptoed out of our room and disappeared up through our ceiling right before my dad came charging in. I was terrified. I wasn't able to ever speak about this incident until a couple of years ago. My whole life I thought it was a ghost. It was only when my husband suggested it might be an alien when I told him that its arms were insect-like and it walked funny. Story 4. My boyfriend and I had planned a camping trip in Canton, Oklahoma for October 27th to 28th, 2018. We got to our campsite late in the afternoon and started to set up like usual. Unload the truck, set up the tent, set up our chairs around the fire pit ring, and pile the firewood up. I was really excited for the fire later because we had bought a huge log that had one of those holes through the center and soaked with some sort of long burning solution. We got all of our comfy stuff tossed in the tent. We set up our lights and speaker, hung out around the fire ring listening to music and talking until the sun went down. Then my boyfriend started a fire with the single giant log I was so excited about. As we were sitting in front of the fire, the sun completely down at this point, the speaker started to mess up. It was a weird, loud, glitchy static that happened several times, which I had never heard it do before. We figured that maybe it was because the internet was spotty, or maybe the speaker was too far from the phone it was connected to. So my boyfriend went to check it out on more than one occasion and couldn't figure out what the problem might be because we had okay cell service. It started to creep me out, and maybe him as well, but he never said a thing, even if it did. To change it up, we decided to just leave it alone to ignore the glitchy static and go open the Fritos and bean dip we brought and crack some glow sticks at the table. This is where everything ended. I dipped 1 or 2 Fritos in the bean dip, opened a pack of glow sticks, and sitting across from me at the picnic table, my boyfriend opened one of the glow stick packs that you make into glasses. He put the connector piece in his nose like it was oxygen tubes. I remember it so clearly. I remember laughing really hard and saying, "Oh my God, get that out of your nose." And the very next thing I remember was waking up in the tent. I was in a sleeping bag, nearly all the way zipped up, and my boyfriend next to me asking if I'd unzip the sleeping bag and share it with him because he was freezing. And that's when we both sort of snapped out of our sleepy daze and looked at each other so unbelievably confused and honestly really, really scared. So we sat there confused and sort of lost for words. So I said, "What the F happened? Why are we in here? How did we get in here?" I didn't know what to say or think, and my boyfriend looked just as confused and scared, and he shook his head in confusion, and it was all over his face too, just shocked and scared. Then he said, "I don't know. I have no idea what the F happened. I just woke up a few seconds before you. I was just lying here flat on my back with no pillows and blankets or nothing," which for him is weird because he sleeps with a million pillows. We sat there and talked through what all we had done and what we last remembered. We remember the very exact same moment of him putting that connector in his nose like a breathing tube and laughing our ass off. I was really freaked out and kinda hesitant to leave the tent. I've never in my life felt so confused. So we laid back down and he wrapped his arms around me and we kept going over what happened and how it was so weird that it didn't feel like we'd been sleeping on the ground all night. It's pretty typical to wake up from a night in a tent feeling a little achy. So after a while of talking and nothing making sense, I was ready to finally leave the tent. So I started looking around for my jeans and couldn't find them. So I said, where the hell are my jeans? This is not unusual for me to sleep in only a t-shirt, but didn't explain where they were. And all of a sudden, I had a really scary flash of the night that I could clearly remember. I was sitting at the picnic table, he was squatted in front of me, and I was panicked and crying hard and really scared. I was putting giant stickers or thorn things from my jeans. And in this memory, my boyfriend was trying to calm me down and comfort me and said, "It's okay, babe, you gotta grab them just like this." This very clear memory was like a slap in the face. It had to have been no more than a 15-second memory. So I tried to explain what just came to me to my boyfriend, and he said, "I don't remember that at all. Maybe it was a dream." It made me a little irritated because it was so clear and I knew for sure that it happened. So he said he'd run out to the truck to grab my bag with clothes in it. I looked out the tent door flap and saw my shoes side by side set there all nice, not flung to the side like I normally do. But when I looked at my shoes, my right shoe's lace were covered in those giant thorn sticker things. So I yelled, "Babe, it did happen. It wasn't a dream." And I said again exactly what he said in my memory, and it came back to him too. He remembered exactly and clearly. When he came back to the tent, he had already looked even more freaked out and said, "Your jeans were folded nicely on your seat in the truck. You really need to come out here." So I got dressed and stepped out of the tent, and the first thing I noticed is everything was left exactly the same as I remembered it on the picnic table. There was a single Frito in the bean dip, the pile of glow sticks I never broke still in place, and the pack my boyfriend opened with the little plastic connector piece he had put in his nose right on the table with the other parts. All of our firewood was burned. We had a lot of firewood. It was really silent that morning. We walked to the bathroom, and in doing so, we noticed again that all the surrounding lawns were beautifully manicured. So where did the stickers come from? What the hell happened? How is this even possible? One thing my boyfriend noticed that was not normal for him was that he had no pain when he woke up. He was 82nd Airborne Infantry paratrooper and wakes up with leg and back pain daily. So I guess that's the silver lining. Were we abducted, running from something? Why can't we remember anything? We both believe in alien life but aren't sure if this is what we think it is. Thoughts? I've always been so afraid of the dark, and even more so now, and will never tent camp again. Neither of us have had any other memories come back to us, and I almost wonder if it's better that way. I'm not looking for answers. I just thought I'd finally share this. Story 5. My sister and I were sleeping one night, and I was woken up. I don't know by what, but I was able to wake my sister up as well. The room was dark, but I distinctly remember seeing two soldiers, like decorated generals, at the side of our bed, similar to drawings of Pleiadian aliens. Once I woke my sister up, a portal opened up on my side of the bed, along with a vessel that we hopped into, and a track. My sister and I both woke up remembering this experience, and we still do to this day. I can remember it all. She says she remembers them being extremely kind and saying stuff like, "Let's go have fun." Just really warm, inviting and everything. We went into the vessel, which was like a ride. I just remember it being like the Peter Pan ride or It's a Small World ride. And then the ride was over. I don't remember much more. I always used to look down at the ground in amusement park rides to know if they were real. I don't know why I did that, but I remember looking down at the ground and it was so real and detailed. I can't remember much about the ride, but it was bright and vivid with flowers, etc. I live very close to NASA and have seen the TR-3B, Never had any more experiences like that afterwards, but yeah, thought I'd get some insight on what you guys think this might have been. Story 6. My parents' house has this weird light anomaly. I've seen it once, but it scared the crap out of me, and I've never seen it since. It was in 2013. I was coming home with my mom from a football game. She took my neighbor from up the road home first, and then we were coming back down and pulled in our driveway. And the whole right side of our yard was lit up like my dad's truck headlights were on, and we could see the inside of the cab like he had left the door open. Like you could clearly tell that's his truck and the inside lights are on and the headlights. And I was like, where's Dad going this late? And my mom said, probably to your Nana's. She lived on the same road. Literally pull up 5 feet and it's gone. And my dad's truck wasn't even parked there. He was in the shower. He'd moved his truck hours beforehand. So anyway, my dad still randomly sees it. It wakes him up from the light shining in his bedroom window. Last night he woke up, went to his window, checked his phone to see what time it was. He said it lasted for almost a minute, but he checked the time so he could check his security cameras in the morning. The camera facing that side of the house skipped a full minute when it happened, and none of the other cameras did, and they're all wired to the same recorder. And also forgot probably 8 miles away in my first house with my husband, I woke up in the middle of the night because there was a large green light shining outside of our house, and I wake my husband up. He sees the light in a hazy sleep, and it's gone. He immediately goes outside to check if someone's out there, and nothing. Story 7. When I was a kid back in the 80s, my mom, my brothers, and I were driving from Oregon to New Mexico. It was the middle of the night when a sign had us take a detour into the desert. We drove for a long time, and my mom had to stop to sleep in the middle of nowhere. I was sitting in the front chatting with my mom, and my brothers were asleep in the back seat. All of a sudden, the area became as bright as day. The next thing I knew, we were back on the highway. For years, I thought it was a weird memory, but I mentioned it to my mom a couple of years ago, and she said she had the exact same memory. I don't recall any ships or strange aliens other than the bright light and time loss. Story 8. I don't know where else to go with this right now. I'll explain what just happened, and if anyone else has experienced something similar, please let me know. So I was sitting in my living room, watching Netflix alone. My Netflix suddenly stopped working. It came up with the little loading 51% circle thing. My aircon turned off, and then I heard a beep noise, and these two big flashes of light came from either side of my living room, and the kitchen from outside through the blinds, and I suddenly couldn't hear anything. The best way to explain it was like my head was in a microwave, and it was just deafening silence. I tried to say my dog's name and couldn't even hear myself. Then just as quick, the aircon came back on, Netflix started playing again, and I could hear. It was the strangest thing ever. Anyway, this probably makes no sense, and I honestly can't even read it back. I feel like all the energy has been sucked out of me, and I need to sleep. If anyone has any insights, please let me know. Story 9. I keep remembering what I believe was a dream I had when I was young, around 6 years old at the time. I've been remembering it once every few months since then, now 22 years old. Most of my dreams start with me getting out of bed, and this is no different, but something is different about it in that I'm able to remember every detail of this specific dream and barely anything of my plenty of other dreams. So the dream goes like this. I wake up and a bright light is coming through my window. I pull the curtains aside a little and see the light is shining bright around my garden. I can't make out anything, but can see the light is coming from where the treehouse was. I look over to my brother, who is fast asleep. I look back at the window, and a figure is in the garden, silhouetted by the light, but proportions look way off for it to be human. I try to get my brother's attention, but I can't move to shake his feet. I look back out the window, and there's two massive eyes pressed up against the glass. I scream, but no noise comes out. I then woke up, in bed and not sweating. I usually wake up sweating buckets after a nightmare. The recurring part of it is weird as well because I will also remember it randomly, not just when I'm sleeping. I'll be drinking a tea or sat in a lecture and the whole dream play out in my head again. I also seem to wake up with a random cut or two almost mostly healed the morning after I remember it. Story 10. Me and my family were heading towards a beach in San Diego, and we were driving down the freeway. I must have been about 15 or 16 when this happened, but I was listening to music and looking up at the clouds from the car window. Anyways, I suddenly noticed this weird triangular looking thing, black object, really far up into the sky. Mind you, there were clouds in the sky that day, so it was a bit difficult for me to keep track of it as it was moving. At first I thought it was probably a plane because it's not very often that people see UFOs in the middle of the day. As I continued to watch it, I noticed how odd it was moving in the sky. It looked like the point of the part of the UFO was pointing downward toward the Earth. It was very slowly moving down closer to the ground. I was trying to convince myself that it was probably a plane, weather balloon, etc. But then I was like, planes usually don't fly downwards, right? As we continued to drive and the clouds were moving across the sky, I lost it for a minute or two and thought that was the end of it. I finally spotted it again and noticed that it was moving downward a bit quicker in the sky. It suddenly occurred to me to alert my family of this weird object in the clouds. However, before I got the chance to look away, the object stopped moving downward very abruptly and all of a sudden it shot back into the sky almost at lightning speed and I never saw it again. Afterwards, I was kind of frantically telling my siblings and parents of what I had just seen, and my father pointed out the small fleet of jets that suddenly shot across the sky in the direction where I saw the UFO, which seemed quite weird to me at the time, but I didn't think much of it. But to this day, I still don't really know what it was that I saw. Story 11. It was Christmas 2002. We were celebrating at my grandmother's house, very rural area, not touched by city light pollution. There were at least 6 people in the room when all of a sudden a blue beam of light appears at the top of all 4 walls in the living room and scans its way down the entire room. We all saw this. Everyone stopped talking to watch it, and when it was over, it was a mystery. Everyone began discussing what we had just seen. Soon after this happens, a very bright white flash of light fills the room. Everyone sees this as well. We made sure no one had taken a photo, as it looked identical to a camera flash, but this was not the case. I've thought about this several times since it's happened, and have tried researching other similar experiences with very little results. I wonder if anyone can say that this happened to them as well. Story 12. I was around 12 years old, out for a walk with my friend in Newfoundland, Canada. The sun was starting to set. We started to walk towards a hiking trail that was pretty steep. Near the top of the trail, there was a huge rock, and something was sitting beside the rock. The way the sun was facing made it hard to pick out any details, but we saw its silhouette and knew that wasn't an animal or a human. It was either sitting or it had no legs and it was hunched over picking up something slowly in a weird movement. It's hard to describe. Its arms and body were super lanky and thin, and its head was super small, about half the size of a human head. My friend and I just stared at it for a minute, then it stopped what it was doing. It moved its head and stared at us. We both ran home as fast as we could. We didn't say a word to each other. We decided to draw what we both saw in different areas. We flipped the pages over and we both saw the exact same thing. If I was alone, I wouldn't have believed what I saw. But my friend saw the same thing, and many years later, we both remember that day. Story 13. I will never forget summer before 7th grade. Sometime in July, Wednesday night, early Thursday morning. The evening before, my family had watched the old school show Unsolved Mysteries. I awoke in the night, lying on my right side, awake but my eyes still shut, completely silent. None of us ran fans back then to aid in sleep. I was awake and basically waiting to fall back to sleep again. However, I decided to open my eyes. On the right side of my bed, right there, was a being, seemingly fixated on a plush bear that I kept in bed with me, and this being fit all the descriptions I'd ever heard about or watched on television. Shorter, pale gray skin, and those awful eyes, huge, black, slanted, staring at my bear, right by my bed. Honestly, I cannot put into words how I felt right at that moment. I was only just about 12 at the time. At some point, I pulled my covers over my head and felt an awful rushing through my body of super warm, then cool, then warm again. Only later in my life did I understand that I was most likely feeling shock. I couldn't scream, felt frozen, too scared to scream maybe. What if I did scream? My mother and stepfather and two brothers would hear me. What the heck would they do if they came running into my room and saw this thing? What would it do? Is it going to kill me, abduct me? What if it already had and they were returning me? All these thoughts, plus a million more, just racing through my young mind. Awful just recounting all this and writing this story here. Again, how could I ever forget something traumatic like this? So being such a brave 11-year-old slash 12-year-old, and after what felt like 12 hours, I decided to try and scare it. I decided I would thrash my legs up and down from under my covers as hard as I could. I know, horrifying. I was so petrified though, so I did this, then remained under my covers just waiting. Nothing happened, so I stayed under my covers. This had to be at least close to being going on 2 hours from when I first opened my eyes and saw this thing. As I lay wide awake, I heard a noise. To this day, I still cannot explain exactly how it sounded. The sound felt as if it surrounded me and was coming from outside. It was a crisp, clean sounding sound, maybe mechanical, but maybe not, lasting only about 2 seconds. A sound that I definitely had never heard before and definitely had not heard since. As soon as I heard the sound, something in my mind told me, oh, they're gone. As crazy as it sounds, I firmly believe the sound was their transportation leaving. Needless to say, I didn't sleep the rest of the night or early in the morning. It took me so long to confide in my family about this terribly scary incident. Of course, they did not believe me. However, now, from time to time, my mother will mention it and suggest that maybe that's why I suffer from insomnia now. Very well could be. Story 14. 6 years ago, my boyfriend at the time, husband now, woke me up sweating and vibrating, in absolute fear. I asked him what was wrong and he began stuttering and telling me I would never believe him. He went on to tell me that he was woken up around midnight to this person standing at the end of the bed. My first thought was sleep paralysis, but he sat up and was ready to attack if he needed to. And in his head, he heard a voice that wasn't his, telling him it was okay, that they weren't there for ill reasons. He said he immediately felt calm from that. He also noted that he was shocked with how light a sleeper I am, that his movements didn't wake me. This being was unnaturally tall and actually had to crouch a little due to its height and us having been asleep in my basement. He said that this being reached out for a greeting and again began hearing a voice in his head saying hello. Nothing much else happened that night as my husband was frightened. All he remembered at the time was the last thing he heard from it in his mind was, I'll see you again soon. And then he said it felt like as if time had started again, not realizing that it ever felt like it stopped until that point, and he was back in reality. That's when he woke me, feeling it had only been about 10-15 minutes when it had actually been over an hour. These visits continued for months, minimum once a week, max 3-4 times, but my husband got less and less frightened every time. This thing and him built a sort of friendship from what he explained to me. It had a name, but for the life of me I can't remember what it was. It answered any and every question my husband had, and I won't mention what those were, but after a while it just stopped, and he stopped waking me up in the middle of the night or telling me about it the next morning. but the times were always the same. He would be awoken around midnight, and they would have discussions about literally anything my husband had curiosities about, and he would come back to reality and time would unfreeze again between 1 a.m. and 1:30 a.m., having only felt like the encounter had lasted a short period of time. Once it stopped, I can't iterate just how much it meant it when it stopped. It was like for him it never happened. It's been 6 years, so I know this is choppy, but it's hard to remember everything with it having been so long ago now. I forgot about it for so long, and I don't know what prompted me to remember it about a week ago, but now I can't stop thinking about it and the oddness of it and how it just stopped so suddenly. And he's literally never made mention of it ever again, and I've never brought it up to him for this last week in fear that he may think I'm crazy, which I don't know why that's my fear, but part of me thinks if there's a chance he's completely forgotten it, whether it be on his own or something else, he may think I've gone insane. Anyways, this is long, so if you read the whole thing and have any ideas or similar stories, please let me know. I'll try to figure this out, as it's literally keeping me up at night. Story 15. This happened years ago, but I know it's real. On August 26, 2016, it was a normal night. I went to bed at 10 p.m. Awake around 1 a.m., half asleep, to see a gray human, aged 14 to 17, standing in my doorway. He tells me he crashed his or her ship nearby and needed to rest. I said fine and threw it a blanket from my top unused bunk and an extra pillow so it laid next to my bed to break the silence. I asked how far and where you're from. It answers telepathically, 32 light years, then pulled out some device like a radio from the 80s, and I hear the start of a broadcast. Good morning, Galaxy, something. Soon I was getting yelling texts from my mom to be quiet and go to sleep. I turned to look at my phone, and it's 4 a.m., no texts. Room is exactly as before going to bed, and I think it's just a dream. Then look at my back door, a crack open, knowing it was shut, but not locked before going to bed. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories. Hope you enjoyed.